a choice right now, between fear and love. It's just a ride.
Out of the dark night of ignorance and into the shining light of truth.
Expanding reality.
A population of citizens capable of critical thinking.
We don't see things as they are, we see them as we are.
There's a level of reality where everything dissolves into an ocean of energy.
We empower our experience by insisting on our authenticity.
That's very profound. Very. Expanding reality.
Welcome to Expanding Reality. I am your host, Brandon Thomas. On this incredibly amazing episode, dear friend and brother Marc Malone joins me for an incredibly cool chat about the empowerment of you, the philosophy of science. He casually mentions that he has a discovery for cancer, no big deal, as well as idiosyncratic biology. Guys, this is a phenomenal conversation. Don't forget to check the links down in the show notes to find out all the ways to join and participate in what Marc Malone has got going on, as well as his previous episode with dear friend Brian Vecchio will be located down there as well. It's episode 175. Just made it easy and linked it for you. Now, also, if you'd like to support your favorite show as well as catch the afterthought for this conversation, we go deep into it, guys. Paradoxical intent. I'm not even going to explain what that is. It's just amazing. Come check it out. Definitely a great way to support your favorite show. So again, find Marc down in the show description as well as all the other ways to hang out with us. But for now and in the meantime, this episode very specially dedicated to the one that we lost way too soon, but she made a massive impact on this place. Thank you, Jilly. Godspeed. Without any further ado, Marc Malone. I think that was it, man. How are you feeling? Feeling good? Feeling fresh?
No, but I'm alive. So, I don't think I've felt good or fresh in probably about 2 years. But I'm feeling grounded and alive.
Welcome to the show, Marc Malone. It's good to see you, brother.
Good to see you too, my friend.
All the ways to find you, America21, as well as your first episode on the show here, 175, where you joined our mutual brother, Brian Vecchio. And we had just a dope-ass conversation, man, about all the work that you've done, all the incredible empowerment you've done for folks here in the States, here on the sovereignty. You came installed with the sovereignty journey. You've already got a trust. You've got fascinating things happening in your life. You come empowered, which is fascinating. So you and I have also been dancing an incredibly dark last couple of years, and it has really bonded you and I, man. I feel like much closer to you than most folks in my life, and we have bonded over trauma, as some dudes may in a war or something like this. I remember you were the guy that we'd be like, hey, do you want to have a call today and talk each other out of committing suicide? And it was that heavy, guys.
Yeah, really. Yeah.
And for good reason, man. And so I just want to tell you what an honor it is to know you in this air quotes reality, but also just to introduce you to the audience again. And if you don't mind, man, I'm going to link all the ways to find you as well as your previous episode. If you don't mind, just let folks know who you are in your own words, brother.
Who I am or what I do. Because the thing is that I don't even know anymore, but that's a part of the journey, I guess. Yeah. So I started America21, which was a project course that was about creating sovereignty in states against global governance. Okay. The whole idea, the whole premise here is that you can't prove any world government. You can't. It doesn't exist. There's no literature anywhere that's proving a world government other than sketchy protocols of Zion or something like that. But there's nothing provable. But there's countless, limitless documents proving global governance, which is very different. And of course, if you think about it, it makes total sense because governance doesn't require government. It doesn't require any elected representation. It doesn't require any voice or concern from you. Governance could be BlackRock. Governance could be the World Economic Forum, the United Nations, all of these non-elected bodies. So global governance is very real. And not only is it documented, they're proud of it. So the work here then was to essentially get states. I knew getting the federal government out of something like Agenda 21 and 2030 was a non-starter. It was a waste of time. There's not even any point in going there. But we did manage to make significant gains in states, particularly in reversing some of the very, very serious, egregious crimes, such as the 30% of the land stealing, just call it what it is, by 2030. So, of course, in Agenda 2030, they need to take 30% of all of America, well, all the world's land, all countries' land, by 2030. And that's, of course, a lot of the most valuable land, where the water resources are, where the growing of food production is, where the natural resource that would allow us to be independent, that would allow us to be sovereign. So they're taking all that, especially in the best places, like Montana, like Idaho. Like, so they're not taking the barren wastelands, of course. They're not taking, what's that place in California called? The horrible, like, desert place?
Yeah, Death Valley, probably.
Death Valley, yeah, exactly. They're not taking Death Valley. No, they're taking all the beautiful rivers and lakes and farmland. So what I did is I would work with some state governments and lots of people that are outside of the system as well. The whole idea here is to bring everyone to one coherent unit, like native tribes, groups that I cannot say publicly without getting a visit from the government at the door. But I would work with lots of different people in power officially and in power non-officially. And the point is with one common shared interest. Do you want to be able to feed yourself without BlackRock feeding you? Yes. Okay. Well, then let's all put our differences aside for a bit until we figure this problem out. And then let's have our petty squabbles later. Right. So if you want to fight over whether you want to chop your ween off or not, that's awesome. Let's do that at 2031. Let's do that at 2031. We can fight over pronouns then. Right now, I want to be able to feed my children without knocking the door of Larry Fink and going, please, sir, can I have some more? So I would prefer that we just, take care of business first. And we've rescued many, many, many millions of acres of land. Many millions of acres. In addition to that, banned mandatory injections in some states, got anti-global governance policy put into some state governments, including in Montana. You can go search for this. You can go search in Montana state government policy, and you will find anti-global governance by word in the policy of the government. And that was because I advised them to do so. So you think of me like Zbigniew Brzezinski or Rockefeller, except for the good guys as opposed to the evil people. That was my role.
Yeah.
And then my wife got cancer and died, and haven't done that since. So, yeah.
Yep. Man, you have just done so much for this world, and you've empowered so many people as well. As, I mean, you breezed right over the local elections thing, but you've really gotten a lot of people to take their actual communities back through actual elections and being proactive in that process. Because again, guys, one of the fun facts is 72% of local elections go uncontested. So a little something to marinate on if you needed a little kick in that direction, if you want to still play that game or, bring it down from that inside. But yeah, yes, sir. And then you had a visit from the shittiest life can offer you. And I don't know how deep you want to go on that, Bubba, but it really redirected you. But I don't think in it definitely not in a permanent way, but I think it empowered you so much. Because one of the things that you and I would end conversations with every time, because it did get dark, and every time you and I would have conversations, we would end them by saying, they should have killed me. They should have gotten rid of me because I'm still here and I'm more powerful. So if you want, as much as you're comfortable with, what would you like to talk about that transition, that step, and even who you are now comparatively?
Well, there's lots of different layers to this. So, when something, I love Gillian more than anything in the world. Not just more than any person, but really more than anything that I could think of, like more than the Grand Canyon, more than achieving my wildest ambitions, more than even winning against the New World Order. So it's hard to explain the devastation that does to you when the most precious thing to you is gone, permanently gone in this realm. And we can get to that part later about the eternity of things. But there is a natural process that you have to go through of accepting that it's gone here before I think you can come to the acceptance of the eternity of things. Otherwise, you kind of run the risk of this spiritual bypassing. And that doesn't help you. The shadow will come and eat you at some point if you don't accept that the dark part of it first. So that, because a lot of people would say, hey, she's still with you, you'll see her again. I'm like, yeah, I understand all that, but that could be 50 years away. Imagine someone said, look, I kidnapped your wife, you're going to see her in 50 years. Wouldn't feel great about that either. And that's basically what you're saying when you say, I'll see her again. It's like, cool, could be a really long time. Could be a really long time. And I've had a very traumatic life already. I mean, I lost many of my closest family members, my dad and my brother, to very traumatic circumstances, young. We're talking things like suicides, we're talking like missing persons, and then lots of others to drug abuse. Half my family went to prison, you name it. We could go through all of that, but this was like times 100. So I've never struggled with the ability until I came in confrontation with this, that my body naturally just didn't want to be here anymore. So then I started getting serious health problems like heart inflammation, lost 30% of my body weight. 40% is death by starvation, by the way. So 10% more and I'd be a goner. I'd be gone. Kidneys would have shut down. All I needed to lose was 15 more pounds and I'd be dead. Couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Heart, just literally body was giving out. It was like literally having half of you ripped away, and my body was just naturally, organically, just like, nah, I don't want to do this. Don't want to be here. When you and I were talking a lot throughout this process, it was about figuring out, well, how do you make being here worthwhile, right? And I suppose it took some time, took many, many months to get to that place where I could understand what that value was. So that's like on the personal side. On the professional side, quote unquote, it did open up a whole new world, which was, I studied philosophy of science, so that's the convergence of philosophy and science, right? So that's the convergence of, say, systems of logic, or various systems of epistemology, like rationalism or rationality or empiricism or whatever, and the convergence of how these categories of knowledge merge with science, in this case, any type of science. And really, you could think of philosophy of science as the meta-science. In other words, it is how to do science well at all. How do we know we're coming to the correct conclusions at all? What kind of knowledge are we using? What kind of scientific methods are we using? Because there's many scientific methods, many, not just one. So then we're using all of this, and then we're going to go, okay, I know that this is real science based on the fact that the theory, i.e. the theory of, you apply a theory to nature, you look at, say, okay, the wind is blowing the trees. I'm looking at some trees, so I'll use this as an example. The wind is blowing the trees. Okay, so the wind is A and the tree is B. So A plus B equals wind blows trees. Okay, so that's like a theory, that's a formula. But where you get into issues with science is when that formula is not observable in reality. So the theory, the formula, has to actually also meet reality at the same time. So then where we start to see, say, climate change or something, or COVID or something like that, you start to see, well, the theory isn't meeting reality. Like this idea that there's a plague that everyone's dying, but I'm not seeing that. So the theory, the formula, is not actually merging or converging with the reality I'm seeing. So philosophy of science teaches us how to pull that apart and know if a scientific theory is meeting the evidential criteria. Why this is relevant is because when Jill was dying of cancer, I treated her cancer. And we had 8 doctors, spent $500,000, naturopathic medical doctors as well, many of them, most of them. And nothing worked. And by the way, these were like some of these NMDs were like not just knowledgeable on all of the good cancer treatments, natural or otherwise, but very successful historically with these treatments. They've treated a lot of difficult patients with lots of nutrient IVs, lots of various protocols. It literally did nothing. It didn't even buy us a week. The only 2 times we saw any regression of a disease is when I treated her in my basement. So what happened was I put together a cancer treatment formula. Now, since then, I've been pulled into, and this is really Brian's fault because Brian decides to pull me into every project that exists. He's like, Brian's like, hey, guess what? Do you want to meet with the shadiest characters in the world and I don't know, start dealing illicit compounds? I'm like, yeah, sure, why not? I'm bored, got nothing better to do. Figure it out. I'm joking, FBI, taking the piss, you pricks. don't fucking want them hacking my computers and shit again. So I got pulled into lots of different scientific projects is the point. And I wanted to lay that groundwork so people could understand why. So it's not just like there's some random dude who went for politics and decides for no reason. There's like a continuation from both my prior work and then what I did with my wife. That kind of pulled me into this. So right now my focus is more in treating disease. I will likely get pulled back in, of course, to New World Order stuff at some point. But right now my focus is in various diseases and energy production and all sorts of more like, I guess, scientific innovation that's going to help us all. It's still about sovereignty. It's just a different type of sovereignty. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, no, it completely helps. And I love this just assertion of rights, ideal over this just sort of running out and declaring them, right? It's like running out and going, I'm this, I'm this, I'm this. It's like, well, just, you already are that. Just be that and embrace that and live your life that way. You probably never come across the things that they're scaring you about. But the interesting part with this as well is you just kind of breezed over that you found a cure for cancer in there. So I wouldn't mind going back over that if you want to spend some time on that. What was your treatment protocol? What, did you find? What was your... Talk to me, Goose.
Yeah, so cure, I wouldn't call it a cure, although it's possible. It depends. So I need to do a lot more testing before I can determine if it's the case. So the reason that Jill still died is because I was doing this on the fly as she was dying. In addition to that, of course, dealing with the emotional turmoil of that and looking after 3 children who are 1, 2, and 3 years old, and the 3-year-old being severely autistic. So of course, it was never going to be, I really thought it was possible to complete at the time, but looking back on it, I don't see how it could have possibly been possible to complete it at the time. But even with the regression of her disease twice, at stage 3 and at stage 4, which, like I said, was the only 2 times her disease regressed at all, it at least gave me insight into that, okay, we are onto something. This is gonna work, but there's a lot of other variables that have to be figured out. And over the months since then, I have figured out what those variables are, I think. If that is true, which I think it is, we have a potential cure. But if nothing else, we can reverse cancer in at least like 10% of cases, which is many millions of lives saved, and extremely cheaply, and most importantly, with very little side effects and 0 long-term side effects. So the side effects that will happen will only be when you're taking the treatment. They won't last afterwards. So most of these are natural compound combinations. There's a couple of pharmacological compound combinations, but these are just like anti-parasitic type drugs, nothing gnarly like chemotherapy, of course, or anything like that. Cancer is quite a tricky disease because there's so many different types. It morphs, it changes a lot. So what happens is you could have 2 people, same type of cancer. One does a juice cleanse, and one does an enema, and one does fasting, and they survive, and the other person doesn't. And I saw this a lot because we were in clinics, including natural treatment clinics, with lots of people where this exact thing would happen. So why is that? Well, because idiosyncratic biology, so your individual biology is quite complex. You have your own genetic predispositions, and then of course people like us know you also have this thing up here, the mind. You also have the heart. You have all of these other power centers in you. So you could do the same treatment, but think you're going to die and probably still die. And so that's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it, though, is like, let me use an example, schizophrenia. I know that sounds like it's from left field, but I promise it's going somewhere. Okay, so schizophrenia is kind of a result of a gene called COX-2 overexpression. Now, what this basically means is that there's a gene that's breaking pre- and postsynaptic barriers, and that causes what we would call like this kind of psychosis. And severe autists have COX-2 overexpression too, and it can be caused by lots of things. Amphetamines, big time, can cause this. So if you're into meth or a lot of Adderall, that will really push this kind of problem, and it would make sense why you would then gain psychosis after you do a lot of amphetamines. So, but COX-2 is a very good anti-cancer agent. We have clinical proof that people with lung cancer and high COX-2 expression are much better in survival rates. People that have mental illness and drug abuse addiction problems, typically have autoimmune disease underlying it. Interleukin-10, which is an anti-inflammatory cytokine that the body shoots out. Primarily, these things come from the bone marrow, the glands of the system. This is your natural viral anti-disease immunity, right? The anti-inflammatory cytokine comes out and tries to kill whatever is trying to kill you. Okay, now if that goes overboard, you have autoimmune disease and you have a different type of disease. But if it's just at the right amount, you can kill a lot of disease. So people that have, say, alcoholism or schizophrenia, they have higher amounts of this interleukin 10 or anti-inflammatory cytokines. That's kind of what's causing the addiction and the schizophrenia, alongside these other genetic expressions. Why I'm saying all this is because you could have the same people doing the same 2 treatments, the same cancer, except one might have a bit of autoimmune disease or an addiction or schizophrenia, that idiosyncratic predisposition they have within them is giving them an edge. In other words, their body is already fighting disease all the time, which is causing a mental disease, but the benefit is they would fight the physical disease much easier than you would. So this is why it can be quite hard to quantify. So when I'm doing a treatment, I'm thinking about it holistically, not in someone like that. So what I'm trying to do is go, it doesn't matter if you have that or you don't have that. This is going to work for both people. And that's not an easy thing to do, but it really just requires looking at it as a system of logic. The body does work on a system of logic. Everything does. I mean, even cancer is logical. It actually makes sense once cancer develops because of hypoxia, because the tissue, the cells are not getting oxygen. So you could imagine you go back a few thousand years and let's just say you're trapped in a cave. Your body is being sapped of oxygen. If it didn't develop into cancer, you would die within hours as opposed to within 2 years. So you could imagine that if it develops into cancer, it's basically trying to shift that lack of oxygen into surviving tissue. Well, in 2 years, you could grow a farm, you could have 3 children, the species continues, life continues, and then you die. So even cancer has a logos, a purpose. It's anti-adaptive now, it's not helpful now, but there would have been a time in our development and in our evolution where it was actually a survival mechanism. So when I'm looking at something, I see everything as a teleology. In philosophy, we call that teleology, which is an endpoint, a purpose. Even cancer has a purpose and an endpoint, which is actually to help you survive. It's just maladaptive in how it's helping you do that. So by understanding the system, we can reverse the system.
It's just easily one of the most incredibly cool and amazing breakdowns I've ever heard in my life. It's just so well thought out. This is the next level that we're talking about. It's this idiosyncratic biology, as you speak of, this very specific, very tailored to you type response of what you're talking about. And mental is taken into consideration, hopefully your astrology, because there's 12 salts that you probably already know about, these tissue salts that are very important, that are released at different times.
Astrology scares me, man. My wife was Jill was really into astrology. She was like really good at it. Every time I do it, like it makes me, there's not much that makes me very neurotic, but astrology makes me extremely neurotic. Once I get a reading and they're like, yeah, so this is what's going to happen, I'm like, oh shit.
No, we're going to empower you with it. Fuck that, because it's way too empowering for you to be that turned off by it. We'll do it at another time. But one thing I want to say is that by the astrology, you can mark 12 months, 9 that you're in the womb, you're denied 3 of these things, but it's very specific per person. These are base tissue salts that your body needs to build itself back. So I'm just going to offer you another unit of measurement or a data point in there for you. And, you don't have to look at Virgo, whatever. It's just 12 things, 12 months. That's it. And we'll just go with it for that.
I haven't heard of that. That's quite an interesting idea.
You're going to love it. This is a massive data point, especially where you are right now with what it's done for me and my wife. I've changed my life with these things. We started taking these little things, just the 12 base, and then based on when I was born, just happens to be this time of the month, whatever, my 3rd salt over was one that really cured this poison ivy thing that I had going on, which, by the way, that salt in particular cures skin disorders. So it's just really interesting. Just salts. It's just minerals. That's it. Anyway, we will absolutely talk about it. I know the audience is just over it.
So important. I didn't realize just how important salt was. Now, I know you're talking about very specific salts and not just sodium, but so much more important than I ever could have imagined. It just something interesting about this. So Na plus, the sodium formula, that is what generates dopamine throughout the neurology of the brain. So it comes into that, and tyrosine, L-tyrosine, become dopamine and become all of these ions pushing through the brain. So I was like, oh, now it makes sense. The war on salt makes sense now. They're yeah, they don't want your brain actually to work properly. So like, reduce the salt. And I was like, dude, your brain literally cannot work without sodium. Like, it is probably the most important ion generate energy throughout the brain, especially.
You're an electrical being, dude.
Yes.
And it's about not only salts, but these 12 particular salts and the way that they're manufactured. So reduced down to their purest forms, all of these things. Because if you look at what you said, the war on salt, but even that, what they offer you on tables anywhere you go is iodized salt, right? And
Not
so it's
ideal.
this,
Yeah.
no, it's this absolutely mineral deficient type thing. So we use a Celtic sea salt if we're salting stuff, which we salt the shit out of stuff.
Nice.
So
Well, that's where I'm
we
from.
called bullshit
Celtic
on that
sea
side.
salt. That's my people. I'm Irish and Celtic Sea, so that's the real deal. So I just used to drink the seawater where I grew up.
God
Yeah.
damn. Okay,
It's the actual,
that's hardcore.
It's the actual Celtic Sea itself. You know, go straight to the source. Yeah. No, I mean, I wouldn't advise that, but still, it's better to get the Celtic Sea salt.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride, and especially this shifting from sovereignty to health to personal freedom to, there's a spiritual component to all of this as well. So, let's touch on that. What are your thoughts about what's going on in this realm? What does this place function on? And spiritually, what do you think our relationship is?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's kind of funny that I've been in a situation over the last 5 years of constant spiritual change. Now, I know that's kind of normal for people just throughout your life, but I'm talking quite significant constant change. When you come confronted with something like I was confronted with last year with my wife dying, this is where the rubber really meets the road. Because if you can remain spiritual there, then you really do truly believe it, and really nothing can shake it at that point. And I think that's where you get the ultimate test on, is this a performance or is this real? And for me, I realized that it is really real, that it couldn't be shaken even with that. But that's only because I truly had to know it. And I guess this is why the idea of gnosis, about knowing as opposed to belief. Now, I take a different approach. I don't believe that, I think that the human experience ultimately is about adaptation and overcoming challenge. I believe that is what we are here for. Why? I don't know. I kind of think of God a little bit more like Aristotle did, who I would consider the beginning of Western civilization as we know it today. Because Aristotle formulated the laws of logic, and which is used in without Aristotle, there's no law, there's no science, there's no mathematics. We have nothing foundationally at all. People always talk about the Bible, but in actual practical reality, we use much more of what Aristotle gave us than the Bible. And the reality is that Aristotle's view of God was like this more sort of removed mechanistic being that was kind of like just driving events, but kind of different from that event, as opposed to like the personal God involved in everything, loves you, cares about you, but for some reason is fine to watch children be raped and murdered. So Aristotle's position was different to that. Aristotle would look at it more like me around the ants. I'm not even looking at the ants. Like, I'm like, hey, I'm not like going up to the ants going, hey, ants, look, I've figured out how to cure cancer. It's like the ants don't know. They don't give a shit. They don't know where my brain's at. So Aristotle's view of God was more like that. Be like us doing complex bioscience, trying to tell it to ants. It's like, oh, the ants they're ants. Like if the ant gets crushed, I don't even notice because at the end of the day, the larger ecosystem is going to just work itself out. So in a sense, my view on God would be a little bit like that. But I would also say that I think that our specific purpose is to overcome challenge. Our job here is to adapt and overcome, to learn whatever lessons we decided to learn. There's a train coming by, so I'm going to pause when it comes by. I'm going to let you take it for a couple of minutes, Brandon, but overcome challenge. I'm going to jump on that some more when I come back in.
I love it. And it's a fascinating way to be conscientious for the audio-only audience. Thank you, man. This is a true professional, ladies and gentlemen. And again, all the ways to find him in his first episode with Brian Vecchio are going to be located down in the show notes. It's a fascinating thing when we consider these contemplations of larger scale. So it seems that you're a bit more agnostic in it. And I kind of am feeling this way as well. The God-demon thing, this whole battle and that it's a spiritual war and all of this, it lost its flavor for me, especially recently, and I honestly just am abstaining from the whole damn thing. Like, you guys have at it. If there's a demon, whatever. I don't want anything to do with it. What I found also interesting is that the things that I had a lot of invested energy in the observation of and feeling like they applied to me was just sort of this, shit somebody else was saying, or shit I read in a book, or shit I saw somewhere real quick, or, a quick thought or whatever, which none of it's real. Like you said, there's this real ness to this place, but it's all through you. It's this and you nailed it with this. Belief is the enemy of knowing is Crow 777's motto. And that's absolutely correct. You don't know shit until you actually get out and do it. You may believe that you do, but that's a whole nother conversation. And beliefs actually stifle your ability to know and grow because you're unable to allow yourself to do it, because the beliefs often will anchor you in a position of fear and immobility. So it's fascinating the way you pointed out, man. And I'm with you on this. I think that there's some interesting transcendental, even if we want to say freaky woo-woo type things around here. There's the potential for them, but they're not something that I experience that guide me in any way and that redirect my life in any real measurable way. I think that they're just ideas rather than influences, if that makes sense. And so
sure,
the idea
I try
of
to
them
avoid
then might be the
circular
influence.
ideas. Sorry to cut you off.
No,
Go ahead,
you're
man.
good. That was
I
it.
was saying,
Just the idea might be it. That was it.
I try to avoid circular reasoning, which is so easy to do when you're talking about the transcendent. And Christians do this, Christian philosophers do this a lot, which is, and I understand it, because the whole idea is like, I just want to find a coherent worldview. So the idea would be like, God creates the morality, so let's say the 10 Commandments is the beginning of the morality, or Jesus is love thy neighbor, love thy God. Okay, so that's like the foundation. Because if we don't have that, there is no foundation. We're just making stuff up as we go along. Or you could look at it even like the Marc Passio, like natural law kind of stuff, whatever it is. There's some objective command, and then we stand on that, and everything kind of comes from that. But the problem is that because we can't actually tangibly prove that, what we're essentially doing is making a model like the A plus B, like I did with the trees. And then if we're going to do good philosophy and good science, we have to be able to observe the model. We have to, otherwise you get climate shit. You get like, maybe the sea is going to flood everything, maybe because of this computational model. And it's like, well, yeah, but it depends on the data set you're pulling from to make the computational model. Carbon dioxide creates heat. And if that were true, the data you've extracted, carbon dioxide creates heat, then yes, over time, your model would be correct. However, heat also creates carbon dioxide. The whole model's
chickens and
completely
eggs
different.
running around here, aren't there?
The model's completely different at that point, right? So that's one example. So, okay, so whatever the objective moral command is, we're trying to build a model to live and adapt in the world. And it makes sense, but it does begin to break down at nuance and specifics. And here's the problem. And I used the example with the Marc Passio natural law type stuff before. My son's severely autistic. He is a sentient being. One of the fans said my son wasn't a sentient being because he can't determine good from evil. It's like, did you just say my disabled son was not a sentient being? Meanwhile, he's vegan, because animals are sentient beings, but my disabled son is not. This is the level of psychosis that some people are living in. The point is, though, is that this is how autistic, ironically, it is autistic thinking, because we start to lack the nuance. Because, okay, so my son, he likes to eat his own poop. Part of the condition. It's the feeling, the sensory feeling of things. It's not really about the poop. For some reason, it's the texture and the mushiness and stuff. Okay. Now, if I was just to leave that poop in his hair and on his face, he'd get a bacterial infection eventually and die. He doesn't like me cleaning it off. He doesn't like me putting him in the bath, but I have to because it's good for him. But I'm breaking his consent. He doesn't want me to do it, but it's good for him. So this is where, when we try to have an extremely rigid view, it begins to break down at nuance. And you could apply the same even more so to Christian rigidity. So whatever that is. In this case, you could say like, well, I don't know, no procreation before marriage or something like that. And you go, okay, but what if you can't get married? What if you have a year to live? You're dying of cancer. There's no point in really getting married anyway. You're just going to die. Or what if you can't get married because of immigration issues, like when I was on the other side of the world, but you want to have a child before you die, so your potential future wife, who's not going to be your wife, has a piece of you to live on. Is that still bad? Right? So these things begin to break down at nuance, is my point. They become circular, though. So you're essentially creating a model so you can come back to the beginning of the model you've created so you can feel comfortable with what you're doing in life. So it becomes like a cycle. It's like, well, God said this, or natural law says this, so I'm going to do these things. Why are you doing those things? Because natural law said this. Right, so it's like a cycle. So I try not to live in that. Now, it is inescapable to a degree. We're all going to do this to some degree. But what I try to do is think of it more like a spiral, I guess, of something just constantly going to its end point, which may never end, right? And in terms of life eternally, it probably won't. But you are still moving, you are still traveling, and you're still going in like a coherent geometric pattern, but you're not going backwards and you're not going around. You're going in a destination point, wherever that is, I don't know. And I do believe, as part of the thing I was talking about earlier about overcoming challenge and our purpose here, our ontology, the nature of our being, this is observable in reality itself. How does evolution happen at all? Well, it happens by meeting challenge and being forced to adapt to survive that challenge. That is how all beings on this earth evolve, including human beings. For example, you look at human beings, Northern Europeans in the winter. We had to survive, our ancestors had to survive really harsh conditions. So because we had to survive really harsh conditions, we were forced to save more because winter's rough in Northern Europe. Now, if you live in Portugal, not as rough. If you live in lots of parts of, let's say, I don't know, South Africa, whatever, it's not as rough. So you have to survive harsh winters where you can't grow food. This forces you to think ahead, to plan into the future. That if I don't save my food because I can't grow it for several months, my family's going to starve and we're going to die. Okay, so our ancestors were forced to meet a certain type of challenge. Now, every group meets a different type of challenge. Just like if you're of Arab descent, you meet the challenge of lack of water, right? You meet a different type of challenge. So ours, because of the conditions, forced us to have to save and think ahead to eat. That has helped us evolve to the point where now we're doing that with everything. We're doing that with science, we're doing that with philosophy, we're doing it with politics. And it all really stemmed from meeting this initial challenge of how are we going to survive the winter before the spring comes and we can grow food again. So I see it in nature, I see it in every type of creature, from fly to dolphin to human being, but especially when we look at the history of human beings, we have constantly evolved only by meeting challenge and having to overcome it. So I do believe that's our nature. I do believe that's our purpose here. Why? I don't know, because I'm not God. I would assume the mind of God is probably like the most complex algorithm one could think of, and is probably trying to do every infinite variable and every potential outcome to come to some final resolution about what this all could be. You know, like an artist constantly like painting different pictures until he's like, okay, I've painted every possible picture now. And I understand. I've completed the game, whatever that is. I would assume then our overcoming challenge and our evolution is part of God's mind's universal design of trying to experience every possible experience to overcome every possible challenge, something like that.
It is a fuck around and find out universe, man. It's nothing's handed to you beforehand. You may have every single idea in play, but what's the saying? If you want to make God laugh, make a plan.
Yeah, right.
It's this idea of just that your job is sort of write it out and feel it and experience it. And like you said, it does feel sort of like a simulation type thing being ran. So that's sort of something else I wanted to ask you about. Do you think that there is a God? Or do you think that it's simply God's a nomenclature for an architect or a simulation creator or designer, and that this whole damn thing could just be like some 6th grade aliens project that got like a D-?
Well, to be honest, with how shit it is, it's not. It does feel like
D- the little.
Yeah,
the
it
little
does feel
nice.
like a 6-year-old alien who got a D- because of how fucked up the place is. I would say
I have some notes. You know,
I would say I do. Yes, I do think there is a God. I do think there is an origin force that is separate from everything else, and I think that just like based on, again, I guess the Aristotelian model of logic, and this can be contested. Not all philosophers agree with this, but the vast majority of philosophers that have any validity whatsoever throughout all history agree with the laws of logic that Aristotle kind of put together. So I would say for the most part, it's pretty consistent. So this idea that, okay, if something is moving, like you have a ball rolling down the street, right? Something has to have moved the ball, right? So the wind, you kicked it, some force has to move it. And of course, we know this with Newtonian physics as well, right? So an equal force must move a force to get that force out the way, right? So in which case, then I think there has to be an origin point that is separate. So if you think about it in Newtonian physics, you have like a heavy box that weighs 100 pounds. 100 pounds must come and hit that box for it to move. But it can't be the box. The box itself can't move itself. The object has to be a separate object to move that force. And so even Newtonian physics is really founded on Aristotelian logic.
But there are things that break those laws constantly. Moms picking cars up off of their kids because, the car got on the kid, something like that, right? And so there's all sorts of things that break those laws. The monks putting or that we're told break the laws, and they may be just very natural things that we're all capable of that we're just programmed into not believing, right? We maybe are self-governing ourselves out of some pretty dope superpowers.
Yeah. I think so. The point that I'm more making is that the mother who picks up the car, she still has to pick up the car. Like there still has to be something that's not the car that moves the car. That's really more my point than. So I'm from a logical perspective more than a physics perspective. There has to be something else to move the object, right? So when we think of the universe, everything is in motion. Everything is moving all of the time. There has to be something outside of that object moving that object. That's what we would call God. But you could call it the architect, or you could call it the 6-year-old alien who got a D-. Doesn't really matter to me, whatever it is. But there's something that is not the car that's picking up the car, in this case, the mother, right? So I think that there has to be something, but what that something is, I have no idea. None of us do.
Do you think even though the ball's not real, that kind of shit, like to where, yes, you see a ball move down the street and then we'll apply physics to it, but really that's just our understanding applying set of standards that we've learned here. It's, because even then, like most people, again, I've used the analogy, but how many sides of a coin are there, Mark?
2. Well, it depends. If you count the circumference, then there would be 3.
Just 3?
Well, because you have the one side, the heads, you have the tails, and then you have the circumference around. But edge. Because there's no beginning or end to the circle around, that's really just one.
And then if you think of all the grooves, how they go in and down, if you really run on a microscopic level,
sure.
How many angles and sides were in there in truth, right? And then even down to a microscopic level on the bevels on the side of it, because you'd have edges to even the indentations and all of that. But then you also have, and this is more to my question, you have a fourth state of that coin at least, which is when it's spinning. And so that's its state of potential. And so this is, again, where I find myself just fascinated with this realm, is that we're calling bullshit on so many things. You see Mandela effects where just so much of this reality seems so malleable and manipulative that I think that even at its base level of our presuppositions of things like physics could be built on our observation and us anthropomorphizing ideas onto things, again, presupposing that they're real at all or that they operate in that way at all. Again, people who have air quotes telekinetic powers that will sit there and put a dome over a little piece of foil on a toothpick and spin it from outside, right? It's those things that I find really interesting about this realm. And this is the part where also I find that the hard dependence on physics, which you don't have, but a lot of people have this really strong dependence on the natural, the way that they feel the natural order of things go comfortably, because it's predictable, it's patternistic, it's cyclical. But what if things aren't like that at all? What if that's just our mind making them so?
Well, so I remember there was a guy who lit paper with his hands, right? Like lit the paper on fire. Okay. So this is an interesting point. So, and this is Aristotelian again, by the way. I don't want to just keep talking about Aristotle, but it's important. So Aristotle was the one who broke up this idea of potential and actual, and that was furthered by St. Thomas Aquinas, who was a good Catholic philosopher, but really most of his ideas were just taken from Aristotle. Most of the good Christian ideas were really taken from Greek philosophers and then like rebadged as Christian ideas. But St. Thomas was still a very formidable philosopher. Now, the point is it talks about this Aristotelian idea of potential and actual. Okay, so can I turn the paper into a car? No. Why? Because it's not in the potential for a paper to become a car. I can't just like rub it and it's going to become a car. Okay, so that's why I don't believe we are living in a false reality. But is it in the potential of paper to be fire? Yes. Okay. So do we have magical powers as it relates to turning potential into actual? I believe so. Only if it's within the design of the potential of the thing. The paper can become fire. The paper cannot become a car. That's why we've never seen any instance of someone turning a piece of paper into a car. But we have seen things, even the telekinesis, that is within the potential based on electromagnetic energy, based on what we are beginning to understand more about physics in the 21st century. it would make sense, right? That if you could tap into the electromagnetic energy between me and the object somehow, God knows how, but somehow it would make sense you could do that. But that exists in the potential of the intelligent design. But being able to turn something into something that it can't potentially be is different, okay? And so this goes to this idea that you have a disease. Okay, your default state is not to be diseased. Your default state is to be healthy. But is my default state as a man to be a woman? No, it's not. Right. So then I'm trying to force reality to be what I want it to be. I'm kind of like Luciferian in this idea. No, I'm going to override. I'm going to make the potential whatever I want the potential to be, rather than there being a natural potential that we can reach. And in this case, being able to light fire with your light paper with your hands and make it fire. That potential exists. So I think I'm somewhere in the middle, basically, that I agree that we have a lot of untapped potential that we would consider magical or mystical, but it still has limits based on the potential of the actual design of the actual thing.
Man, and I see this place as all one big fog, as one big everything's the same thing. It's just decided to be this one thing for now for you. And so actually the paper could be a car. And that's what's so fascinating here is like, what limits are we putting on our reality? You know, it's like, how far are you willing to push sort of the ideas? And again, it's all where you're at. It's all your perception, your paradigm, what you feel is possible in reality. I do not disagree that a very scientific, observable approach to what you just said, but also I find it a bummer, to be honest with you. I don't disagree, but man, it's too fucking limiting for me.
I think it's awesome. I think it's great that you could just like light paper. I mean, I find it anyway exciting enough that we could move things with our mind or light things on fire with our hands. I think that's kind of magical and cool enough.
Yeah.
But the thing is that nobody truly has the answers to these things. And I certainly don't. I don't know. Maybe at some point in the future, we will become a reality. Maybe it's just the epoch we're in. Who knows? Maybe this is like a book written by the creator of all things. God is like, okay, so this chapter of human history is just going to be really fucking boring. And we're in that one where it's like, I'm going to put loads of limitations on the game here just to see what they do. And then really, maybe Jesus did turn like water into wine and create bread and fish from nothing, because the chapter of that part of history was magical. Maybe God thought, I'm going to put the game difficulty from very easy onto very hard now for the next 3,000 years, just to make it as boring as possible so everyone kills himself because it'll be funny. Who knows? I don't know. I don't know what God's thinking. But you can't ever rule out anything. If we're going to be good philosophers, we have to be open to that being a potential. That maybe the rules of the game change
when you decide they do. So then this gets to, and what you said about the rules of the game for a little bit, this sort of gets to the archaic Phoenix cycle, this 138-year cycle of where basically 137 and a half years, which is fascinating because that lines up to Jenny's 137.5 degree thing that's found in nature and all kinds of shit. Really interesting. Then this realm, whatever this is, sort of resets itself, meaning that all life here is sort of purged. Even if not a specific amount of life or conditions exist to where the main sentient life on this is changed over to some other creature, and we give humans a shot for a little while. Because if you think about what they say with this dinosaur narrative, which I don't believe what they're saying is the actual story, but I do think that there was an era of titans before us that if we wanted to build cities and live the way that we do would be impossible with the amount of creatures and the type of creatures running around at that time. So if you were a being that wanted to sort of use the same game board, let's say use the same Legos to build something new, you have to tear down the old, castle and build the pirate ship now, then you got to use the same blocks and materials, then maybe that's what this is. Again, now we're leaning back more toward the 6th grade experiment to where the teacher was like, dude, this is shit. Go home and do it again. Let's reset it. Get all these giants and dinosaurs out of here. Get your sentient creatures, your little sea monkey kit, get them in there. And that's the Anunnaki. Is this some fucking kid over there just saying, here's how life is, and then it resets. But like you said, maybe it's algorithmically as well, because I feel that those things, those limitations are algorithmic. But like you said as well, I think it's ramping up. I think like our adversity ramps up at the same time our potential for extraordinary things ramps up. So this idea of like growth, it doesn't happen in one direction in some awesome, ooh, I'm heading upwards and everything's fun all the time, right? it's growth in both directions. So you're anchoring down into the darkest that you can go so that you can grow as high as you can, like a tree, right? You know, it roots just as deep underground as it is tall to support the shit. So it seems to be formulaic in that way. But also, like I said, it could just be a realm reset here. And then therefore, yeah, other conditions could exist in myriad. You could just say, okay, well, this is what we're doing now. And that's where we find ourselves now. But the good news is it'll be reset anytime soon. So like that song Enema by Tool, right? The Flood, bring it on.
Yeah.
Learn
And
to swim.
I because of the other philosophical influences that I have, and because of the way that I've constructed, I guess the best way that I can view reality as it is, while always keeping room for growth and room for things that I don't understand. When I take, say, someone like Friedrich Nietzsche, who's a big influence on me, and we've talked about this before, Nietzsche's philosophy can really be distilled down to basically two things. The entire corpus can be distilled down to two things. Be proactive and be useful. Don't be reactive and don't be intellectual, right? So be proactive and be useful. And I think that for me is very essential to fulfillment in my life. And everybody's journey is different. Some people are incredibly artistic and need to constantly push the bounds of what is possible to evolve the species. And some people, and I believe I'm one of these, although I don't know if we have many of these. If we did, I guess other people would have done the shit I've done. But my view is my fulfillment here, my mission and my purpose is to change the mechanism so it works better before I leave. Right. So I feel like my job here is more like sent down as a lead engineer to be like, yo, this machine ain't fucking working. Yeah. Why haven't any of you fixed it? And everyone's like, oh, I didn't know how to fix it. I'm like, fuck's sake, I have to do everything myself. All right. So I'm going to turn some screws. I'm going to cure some disease over here. I'm going to fuck BlackRock over here. Okay. I'm ready to die. My mission's done. Take me back. Never send me back here again. Yeah, I'm not coming back. I will kick you in the face, God, if you try to send me back. Make no mistake. Everyone's role is different. Everyone signed up for a different experience. Everyone signed up for a different lesson to learn. And they're all important. All of these things have to come together for a reason. The constant exploration and wonder is important to inspire me to care about the human species at all. So these conversations and these things that we're talking about right now, that's important for me to be interested at all. Right? It's the power of the human heart and the human soul that interests me to save it. Without that, I wouldn't be interested in saving it at all. So, it's kind of like this feedback mechanism where I will provide solutions to keep people here so they can inspire me to keep them here. Something like that.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
There's my son.
Hey, Slugger. I know you can't hear me because you have headphones in, but hi. It's cool to see you, mate.
Such a precious little boy. So yeah, that would be my kind of thing. It's like a feedback loop, a positive feedback loop in this case.
Interesting. I've sort of felt this way as well, that we're sort of either gods in training or that we're in here as Matrix assassins, kind of, that we're here to go, hey, you guys have fucked this place up in a huge way. It's what you said earlier. You mentioned something that said where the rubber meets the road. And there's this quote by Richard Rose that I love that absolutely applies to you, man. That I'm not interested in fixing flat tires. I'm interested in getting the nails off of the highway. And you're a nails off of the highway guy. You're a dude saying, hang on, if we just put magnets under all of our bumpers, then we can suck up that air. You'd come up with some ingenious way for this never to be an issue, right? That's your thing. And it's a big thing to tackle. Think of that. How much easier is it just to repair tires than to make sure nothing punctures them? Now, you're also interested in making better tires, which is also a thought, right? They came up with this thing for your lawnmower where they're called run flat tires. I think it's a military thing that they use, but they have these run flat tires where there's no air in them at all. You can run over, spike everything, and no problem whatsoever. Why isn't that everywhere? Why aren't we doing that, right? So it's these type of asinine things that we look out at our place and see where people are oppressed, where there's no such thing as freedom. And like you said, maybe it is part of the realm right now. It feels like if we were at such a unlimited capacity, I don't see how it could get fucking boring. But some people say that gets boring and that you want to try something different. So what would ultimate oppression feel like, or, semi-oppression or whatever? But it's fascinating, man. It's really interesting.
Yeah. And so I think that it all becomes relevant. It all becomes like part of the big picture. And I think part of the big picture here is that we all kind of feed each other if we are not being dogmatic, if our heart is open, we're just trying to be authentic, if we're just trying to be truly who we are. Because everything that I've talked about today from my part is what I'm genuinely interested in. It's like genuinely what I feel called to do. That's why I'm doing it. Like, there's no performance. I think that's the key part. We have to drop this idea that we have to perform for people. And I think if you're truly then just dropping this performance, like I would be talking about these things, and as you know, because we've talked about them privately, right? When no one's listening, this is just genuinely who we are. Like, I'm interested in these things whether anyone's listening or not. You're interested in these things whether anyone's listening or not. And I think as long as you're being authentic, and we know based on the studies that authenticity is the most important human trait, not love, authenticity. Why? Because authenticity is essentially the integration of objective truth into your subjective reality. Okay, so authenticity is essentially the truth in you, right? So it is then again the convergence of the truth outside of you with the truth inside of you. And that's all authenticity is you kind of falling in alignment with all of that. And that's why it's the most powerful frequency. So if we're all being authentic, I think we will feed each other naturally. Because even if you think about it, even if a psychopath was truly authentic and they were saying, yo, I'm going to have dinner with you so I can abduct you and murder you in the forest, well, then the person would be like, yeah, I'm not into that. I don't think we should go for dinner, to be honest. I don't think it's a good idea, And then it would be that. That'd be the end of that, I guess. So with authenticity, I think we will be taken. It's like the Tool song, right? It's like lateralis. Following our will and wind, we may just go where no one's been. That, for me, is probably the most powerful piece of music that I've ever heard. Because I do think that is the point. I do think that's the point. It goes back to what I was saying, the whole purpose of being here is to follow the spiral. And in this case, it is to follow that authenticity, which is to meet the challenges that are presented to you and adapt and overcome. For what reason? None of us know until we finish, whenever that time is.
I just love the shit out of you, dude. You just a wealth of fascinating information. And like I said, I just treasure you in my experience, honestly. And I'm grateful that you're here to talk to us about this philosophy of yours, and especially coming through what you just did, brother, because they should have killed you. They really should have. They should have made sure that you killed yourself, or you didn't have the support team that you did. You didn't get that last little, you didn't have those 3 kiddos there. You didn't have that. They should have, whatever they was, should have done a better job, because all they did was make you absolutely unstoppable. The most powerful entity I've ever met. And I'm grateful for you again in our experience. So just thank you. I want to invite you, before we get into the afterthought here, reminding everybody that all the ways to find you, America21, as well as episode 175 with Brian Vecchio, are going to be located down in the show description. Before we leave here, though, brother, you've had some challenges and you have overcome more than most. So leave us on a bit of hope here. What gets you out of bed every morning? What keeps you moving forward?
The idea that one of the things I said I came into contact with a group of guys who had also lost their wives and the mother of their children, young-ish, a bit older than me. I'm 33 in October. They're like maybe 40, but young still. Similar situation to me, and many of them struggle with suicide, as often if you lose the person you love most in the world. And they would ask me, like, why just not end it? And I would say there's a couple of reasons. One is because it's an affront. It's a disgrace to everything good that Jill changed and brought out of me. It would be like desecrating all of the work she did in crafting this art. I would just take a shit on all of the hard work she did over the years in making me who I am now, because I wouldn't be this person talking about this stuff without her. Wouldn't be able to help all the people that I've helped without her. So part of it is about continuing that and making her hard work continue to pay dividends for the species. The other part of it is, what do I want my story to be like in the end? when I'm on my deathbed, and I was experiencing this from the other perspective recently last year with her, I have a very intimate view of what this is really like now, in a way that most people don't until they're very old. Because it's not the same if you're with your parent. That's the natural progression. When you're on your deathbed with your young wife and you have babies, that is a whole different view into the dying process. And in that process, the one thing that became most important was the good that we created together and the good that she created in her life and got to leave behind. The thing that gets me the most through is, what do I want my story to be in the end? You know, do I really want my story to end through suicide or through capitulation or through giving up? No. No. If it's forced upon me, okay. If death is forced upon me, if tragedy is forced upon me, okay. But the one thing I have control over is, it's not going to be my choice that it ends that way. And most of all, I want to be able to look back on everything I did and say, I'm proud of you, to myself. You did a good job. Nice work. Never come back here again. Good job. So that's mostly it. I want my story to end that I left this place better than I found it. You know? So, and if there's less people like me in the world who come in after I'm gone, that's good.
Just want to take a moment here and thank dear brother Marc Malone for coming by and just being himself. Love that man dearly, and thank you all out there for your messages of support heading his way. I'm thanking you in advance of this, and also for being the tide that raises all of our ships. So thank you guys so much for being so incredibly cool. America21, as well as his previous episode on the show, episode 175, will be located diggity down in the show description. Check that out. As well as down there in the show description, you can check out the Patreon link, and that is one of the greatest ways to support your favorite show ever. We have hangouts going on there many a month. We have the Astrology and You with Emily Trinkus this Saturday, as well as with Owen Hunt on Sunday. So you guys sign up, we'll get you both links. Thank you again for your support, but definitely want to check out this Afterthought where Marc and I absolutely go off. Not something you're going to want to miss. I want to just thank all of you again for your support, for your kindness, for just rising to the occasion on all the nonsense going on around you and saying, not for me, aloha Felicia, that kind of shit. You know, just you guys are banging it out, and you know that. Just wanted to also remind, because it's never a bad idea, to just be nice to everybody you come across. Pick up a piece of litter you see it blowing around the realm there. Get the fuck out of the left-hand lane. You got somebody behind you wanting to pass. And as always, and above anything else, go out into this wild, crazy, weird realm and just be good to one another. Hug those you love and be good to one another. Thank you again for your support, your kindness, your love, your sharing, your liking, your comments, all that good stuff, guys. We'll see you next time.